The day my coworker stole my career. Nobody in that glass-walled conference room even knew my name. From my seat near the end of the table, I watched my work flash across the big screen while my name tag sat half under my notebook. On the far side of the room stood Ryan Blake, clean suit, easy smile, the clicker in his hand like it belonged there. "So this is the Apex National campaign I've been developing over the last 6 weeks," he said. I knew exactly when those slides had really been created. Late nights at my apartment on the north side of Chicago, the hum of my old fridge, my laptop balanced on a stack of bills. Every draft, every data pull, every tagline in that deck had my initials in the file history. None of that showed on the screen. "This is where we differentiate ourselves," Ryan continued, pointing at a heat map I had built from survey data. "We're not just talking at customers. We're meeting them in the exact moment they feel overwhelmed and giving them back a sense of control." He was quoting almost word for word from a paragraph I had written in a document labeled Apex Narrative V3 Cole. Hearing it in his voice felt like someone else was using my face. Across the table, my boss, Lauren Mitchell, sat with her usual calm, composed posture. Light brown hair straight, blazer sharp, eyes only on him. I had been in her department for 4 years. I had watched careers rise and fall in this room. The pattern never changed. People like Ryan stood up. People like me filled in the spreadsheets. "Brilliant positioning," one of the executives said. "Feels very authentic." Authentic. That almost made me laugh. I pressed my pen into the corner of my notepad until it left a tiny dot. The rest of the page was blank. There was a time when I would have raised my hand and said, "Actually, I developed this framework." That was before Lauren smiled at me in another meeting and said, "We do not keep score like that here, Madison. We succeed as a team." Somehow the team's wins always wore the same faces. "Madison," Lauren's voice cut through my thoughts, "you have been close to the numbers on this. Anything to add on rollout?" Every head turned my way. For a second, the room felt tilted. "The timeline is tight," I said carefully, "but if regions get assets at least 4 weeks before launch, we can roll out in 3 waves without burning out field teams." It was a compressed version of the rollout plan I had emailed her the night before. Ryan gave a small, satisfied nod, like my words were just another bullet point supporting his brilliance. "Good," Lauren said. "That is exactly what I wanted to hear." Of course it was. She had already read it. The rest of the meeting blurred. Questions about budget, jokes I did not catch, the soft scrape of chairs as people leaned in when Ryan spoke. When it finally ended, laptops snapped shut and a small crowd formed around him near the door, a cluster of handshakes and congratulations. I slipped my notebook into my bag and stood. Lauren intercepted me before I reached the hallway. Up close, her expression looked like concern if you did not know her. I knew better. "Nice support in there," she said. Support. Not ownership, not leadership. Support. "Thanks," I answered. She lowered her voice. "Look, I know you and Ryan both put a lot into this, but the board responds to presence. He presents well. That matters. So does the work," I said quietly. Her eyes swept over my plain navy blazer, my low ponytail, the way I held my bag strap like I might bolt. "The work is what gets us in the door," she said. "Credit is a long game. Results come first. The department wins, you win. That is how this goes." She made it sound like a rule of physics, not a choice. "Understood," I said. She gave my arm a quick tap. "Send Ryan any updated numbers for the follow-up deck. We need everything tight for next month. This could be big for all of us." For all of us. In the hallway, she walked toward the elevators without looking back, already checking her phone. Around me, the office sounded perfectly normal. Phones ringing, printers humming, someone laughing too loudly near the break room. Nobody acted like they had just watched something be taken. At my desk, I woke my monitor and stared at my own faint reflection on the black screen. Brown eyes tired, jaw tight. I logged in and opened the shared drive. The Apex folder sat at the top of the list. I clicked it. Drafts, data tables, user journey maps, taglines. In the file history, my initials popped up again and again. Not loud, not obvious, but there. In another version of my life, I might have taken a walk around the block, cried in a bathroom stall, then come back and done exactly what they asked. I might have told myself that someday someone would notice. Instead, I minimized the shared drive and created a new folder on my desktop. I named it one word: evidence. For a moment, I just looked at the empty folder icon. The cursor blinked in the white window like it was waiting to see which version of me showed up next. Then I dragged the first file into it. I did not yell. I did not storm into Lauren's office. I did not send an email I would regret. I just kept dragging copies over, one after another, building a quiet stack of proof that said, in plain, cold lines of text, this was mine. If they were going to build their futures on my work, I decided, then I was going to make sure I had the kind of evidence that could tear those futures open. I had no idea yet how far that folder would travel, or whose careers it would eventually hit when it landed. The folder on my desktop became a quiet promise I carried into work every single day. I kept my head down, but inside, something had shifted. I was no longer trying to prove myself to them. I was documenting exactly how they had underestimated me. Still, the office didn't change. The week after the pitch meeting, Ryan walked around like he had been carved into the company logo. People stopped by his desk to ask for advice. He gave them vague, surface-level answers that sounded like confidence if you didn't know what real work looked like. "Madison," he said one afternoon, leaning against my cubicle wall, "Lauren wants the updated data for Phase 2. Can you send it over? I need to get started on the next draft." Next draft, my next draft. I clicked open the file without looking at him. "It'll be in your inbox." "Perfect," he said. "We make a good team, you know?" I didn't respond. He didn't notice. As he walked away, I added a time-stamped screenshot of the version history to the evidence folder. 3 days later, Lauren called me into her office. The door clicked shut behind me, and the blinds were angled just enough to hide us from the hallway but still let in a strip of afternoon light. "Sit," she said, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. I sat. She folded her hands. "I want to talk about your attitude." It took me a second to find my voice. "My attitude? You've been reserved." Her tone was calm, like she was explaining an audit result. Less collaborative, less open. "That concerns me." My chest tightened. "I've delivered everything you've asked for." "Yes," she said, "but this department depends on trust. When you pull away, it affects the entire workflow. I need team players." Team players. The words hung there like an accusation. "I haven't pulled away," I said. "You've been working differently. People notice." People, not her, not Ryan. People. I knew exactly what this was. The first step toward building a narrative about me, one she could point to later if anything went wrong. "I'll be more visible," I said simply. She smiled like that was exactly the answer she wanted. "Good. I want you here long-term, Madison, but I need to know you're committed." I nodded, stood, and walked out with the taste of metal in my mouth. The moment I reached my desk, I wrote everything down. Date, time, phrases she used, context. It all went into the folder, not out of pettiness but out of necessity. Patterns mattered. A week after that, rumors started. In the break room, 2 analysts whispered as I poured coffee. "She's been acting weird lately." Ever since that meeting. "Yeah, I heard she's upset because she thinks the campaign should have been hers." Well, maybe she should have presented it then. They weren't even trying to be quiet. I capped my coffee, walked out, and added workplace gossip to the growing list in my folder. The tipping point came the following Monday. Our CEO, Martha Reynolds, sent an email announcing that the Apex client presentation had been moved up. Instead of 6 weeks, we had 2. The entire building tightened. People worked through lunch, stayed late, breath like the deadline was oxygen. Ryan, of course, treated it like an exciting challenge. He held mini huddles at his desk, waving his hands as if he were conducting an orchestra. "Madison, pull the demographic segmentation again," he said, pointing at me like I was one of his interns. "I need cleaner numbers for slide 8. Something inside me snapped, not loudly, not visibly, just a small internal click. "No," I said. He looked up, thrown off. "What?" "You already have the segmentation," I said. "It's in the folder I sent last week." "Yeah, but I need it cleaner." "It's already clean." His smile tightened. "Look, I get that you're stressed." "I'm not stressed," I said. "I'm busy." He wasn't used to hearing that from me. He blinked, then leaned in slightly. You know Lauren notices stuff like this, right? Good, I said. I hope she notices accuracy. His jaw shifted, just enough to show he wasn't as confident as he looked. He walked off without another word. That night, while most of the building worked late, I slipped into a small conference room and opened my laptop. I had avoided digging too deep before, but now I was past hesitation. I typed his name into the internal system and pulled old project archives. Then I saw it. Not once, not twice, repeatedly. Campaign structures that looked eerily like mine. Taglines that mirrored drafts I had written months earlier. A former coworker's email complaining about stolen concepts buried in an archived thread. Notes from an exit interview referencing idea theft. A previous manager mentioning unreliable attribution before mysteriously leaving the company. The pattern was unmistakable. He had been doing this for years, and Lauren had known. I stared at the evidence, feeling the room shift. It wasn't just my work he had stolen. I was the latest in a long, careful pattern of exploitation. I copied everything into my folder. Then I created a new document titled Timeline. Because if I was going to dismantle the story they were trying to build, I needed a clearer one of my own. The next morning, the entire office was buzzing with pressure. People ran around with printouts, empty coffee cups, and the hollow look of people who had given their weekend to a job that would never remember it. Ryan arrived late, holding a smoothie, fresh haircut, glowing like he owned the building. "All right, team," he said loudly. "Let's make today count." I watched him from my desk. The evidence folder sat hidden on my screen behind a spreadsheet. No one looking at me would have guessed I was planning a quiet war. By afternoon, an email came from Lauren. Meeting in my office. Now, I stood slowly, heart steady, mind clear. Because whether they knew it or not, the ground under their feet had already started to crack. And I was the one holding the match. Lauren's office felt colder than usual when I stepped inside. The blinds were half closed, cutting sharp diagonal shadows across her desk. She didn't look up right away. She just clicked her pen twice, the way she always did before delivering bad news wrapped in professional language. "Close the door," she said. I did. When she finally lifted her eyes to mine, there was no warmth at all. Just calculation. "Madison," she began, "we need to talk about your recent behavior." There it was, the opening line to the narrative she had been building. "My behavior," I repeated, keeping my voice calm. "Yes," she said. "You have been distant, uncooperative, difficult. Multiple people have mentioned concerns." Multiple people, meaning Ryan. "I've delivered every assignment ahead of schedule," I said, "and with complete accuracy." "That is not the issue," she said quickly. "This is about attitude. You are creating tension." I waited. Silence made people reveal themselves. Lauren leaned back. "Look, I'm trying to help you. If you keep pushing against the structure of this team, you're going to put yourself in a position you can't fix." A position I can't fix. A threat disguised as mentorship. "What position is that?" I asked. "Isolation," she said. "If the department feels you're not aligned, I might have to reassign you. Your career here depends on your flexibility." Reassign. A demotion without the title. Ryan was going to stand on my work while they quietly moved me away from anything important. I folded my hands in my lap. "I understand." Her eyebrows lifted, surprised by how quickly I agreed. "Good. I need you to cooperate fully with Ryan for the Apex presentation. Be supportive. No more tension." I nodded, stood, and walked out. But as soon as the door closed behind me, my pulse steadied, not with fear, but with clarity. Lauren had just given me exactly what I needed, proof of intent. I typed my memory of the entire meeting into my timeline document and saved it. That evening, the office thinned out until only a few lights glowed across the open floor. I stayed at my desk, pretending to refine a data model while quietly sifting deeper into archived folders. The more I searched, the worse it got. Email threads between Lauren and Ryan discussing assigning ownership after delivery. Feedback surveys from former employees mentioning credit dilution. A shipping receipt showing deleted company laptops from the year before, right after another campaign controversy. Then I found something that stopped me cold. An old project folder labeled Northbridge Launch. Inside were drafts that looked exactly like my writing style, tight phrasing, heavy data, consumer-driven angles. But the version history showed a different name, Hannah Lewis. I had never met her. She had left a year before I arrived. Scrolling further, I found her resignation letter. Repeated loss of authorship, it read. Lack of recognition. Concerns reported, no action taken. At the bottom, a final line. I hope the next person in my role is treated more fairly. The next person had been me. I sat back, the air leaving my lungs in a slow exhale. This wasn't just workplace politics. It was a system. A machine that fed certain careers by grinding down others. And Lauren had been guarding that machine like it was a secret worth protecting. I added everything, every document, every screenshot, every resignation letter to my folder. By midnight, the timeline wasn't just a list anymore. It was a case. The next morning, I walked into work to find Ryan waiting at my desk. "There you are," he said. "We need to sync on messaging." "I sent you everything," I said. He smirked. "Lauren wants you in support mode. That means you're backing me up, not questioning direction." I looked at him, really looked at him. He wasn't anxious. He wasn't guilty. He was confident because he believed there were no consequences for him. There never had been. But that was about to change. I spent the day working quietly, gathering more evidence in small increments, making sure nothing triggered suspicion. The tension in the building mounted as the Apex presentation grew closer. People moved like the air itself was pressure. Late that afternoon, an unexpected email hit my inbox. From HR subject, meeting request time. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., my stomach hardened. HR never sent morning meetings unless something was happening. And we all knew who had the influence to trigger them. Lauren. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Maybe they thought they were about to get ahead of the story. Shut me down, document me, reshape the narrative before the board presentation. But they didn't know what was in my folder. They didn't know what I had discovered about Hannah, about other former employees, about years of stolen work. They didn't know the evidence was now too big to bury, too interconnected to ignore, and too devastating to dismiss as miscommunication. I clicked on the evidence folder and dragged a new file into it, a document titled Pre-HR Summary, because tomorrow wasn't going to be the ambush they planned. It was going to be the first fracture in everything they thought they controlled, and I was ready to watch it break. The HR conference room always smelled like disinfectant and reheated coffee, the kind of place where uncomfortable conversations pretended to be professional ones. When I walked in the next morning at exactly 9, Jenna Riley, HR manager, always polite, never neutral, was already seated with a folder in front of her. "Good morning, Madison," she said, gesturing to the chair across from her. I sat, placed my notebook on the table, and waited. Jenna folded her hands. "I wanted to meet because some concerns have been brought to my attention." Concerns. The same word Lauren had used. They were synchronized, rehearsed. This was step 2 in the play. "What kind of concerns?" I asked. She opened the folder. "There have been mentions of you appearing withdrawn, possibly disengaged, creating obstacles in collaboration." I kept my face still. "From whom?" She hesitated, which meant she wasn't supposed to answer that. "These observations came up in your leadership chain. So not multiple people, just Lauren. Maybe Ryan. I understand you're under pressure with the Apex project," Jenna said, "and I'm here to support you. We just want to make sure you're aligned with the team." Support. Another polished word with nothing behind it. "I'm aligned," I said. "I've completed every deliverable." "That's good to hear," she replied. "But this is also about communication, tone, participation." Participation. As in, participate in your own erasure. I opened my notebook slowly. "Can I ask a question?" "Of course." "Has my work quality been flagged?" She shook her head. "No." "Have I missed deadlines?" "No." "Has anyone filed a complaint about my performance?" Another no, this one slower. "Then," I said, "it sounds like the concern is not about my work, but my reactions to someone else's behavior." Jenna blinked. She had not expected a direct path. "Is there something specific you want to talk about?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "Authorship of the Apex campaign." She froze for half a second, not long but long enough. "Authorship," she repeated, cautious. I created the campaign, I said. Every draft, every dataset, every visual direction. It was presented by someone else. She shifted in her seat. I'm not aware of details regarding internal project distribution, but concerns were raised about my behavior relating to that distribution. So the details matter. Silence. I continued, calm and steady. I have drafts, timestamps, version histories, and email threads showing the full development. I can provide them. Jenna straightened. Madison, I'm not asking you to provide anything right now. This meeting is simply a check-in. Of course it was. They weren't ready for the evidence I had. They assumed I was emotional, not prepared. I appreciate the check-in, I said, and I'm committed to transparency. But if concerns about me continue, I want it documented that I offered evidence. You're not in trouble, Jenna said quickly, but her voice had changed. She was not as confident as when I walked in. I closed my notebook, stood, and said nothing else. Outside the conference room, I walked straight past my desk and into the restroom. The lights buzzed softly, and the tiled floor was cold. I locked myself in a stall and breathed. They thought they could get ahead of me. They thought I was the kind of person who would fold when HR was mentioned. But they didn't know me. Not really. After lunch, a company-wide email announced the Apex client rehearsal would take place 2 days early. Everything was accelerating. Tension simmered through the department like static electricity. By 4 o'clock, Ryan popped his head over my cubicle wall. Got a minute? He asked. I didn't answer, but he took the lack of refusal as an invitation. He stepped inside the cubicle, leaning close enough for me to smell the citrus in his cologne. Listen, he said, Lauren told me about the HR meeting. I get it, you're overwhelmed. Big projects do that. I stared at him. And I know it's tough seeing someone else on stage, he continued, lowering his voice. Not everyone's built for presenting. I looked at him so sharply he actually hesitated. What does that mean? He lifted his hands in a mock pacifying gesture. Hey, I'm trying to help. If you get defensive, they'll think you're unstable. Just keep your head down and let us handle the client. Us, meaning him, I didn't say a word. I didn't trust what might come out. He clapped me lightly on the shoulder. Chin up, Madison. We're almost through this. Then he walked away, checking his reflection in the dark surface of a wall-mounted TV. As soon as he was gone, I opened my evidence folder and added a new subfile. Witness statements. I wrote every word he had said. After the building emptied, I stayed late again, not to work on the presentation, not to polish numbers that would be displayed next to someone else's name, but to finalize the one thing I needed. The packet. A neatly organized, chronologically structured, cross-referenced document that showed every draft, every timestamp, every edit history, every managerial omission, every complaint, every pattern, every theft. I categorized each section, labeled it cleanly, added supporting files in a zipped folder. It was no longer just evidence. It was a report that could end careers. At 10:30 at night, the cleaning crew arrived. They nodded, recognizing me. I was one of the regular after-hours faces in the building. When I finally shut down my computer, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Control. Not over them, over myself. When I got home, I placed my laptop on the kitchen table and stared at it. Tomorrow, the rehearsal. 2 days later, the real presentation. 3 days later, the board meeting. The window was closing. The timing had to be perfect. I powered down the apartment lights, crawled into bed, and stared at the ceiling. They thought the story was almost over. They had no idea it was only half written. The morning of the rehearsal felt unnaturally quiet, the kind of quiet that comes before a storm. When I stepped into the building, people were already hovering around the conference room, clutching laptops and coffees like shields. Ryan stood at the front, rehearsing hand gestures in the reflection of the glass wall. Lauren moved between tables, tightening every detail with clipped instructions. Neither of them looked at me. Good. I took my seat in the back corner of the room, opened a blank document, and pretended to take notes. In reality, I watched everything, every expression, every slip, every sign of pressure. At 9 sharp, Lauren clapped her hands. All right, let's begin. The lights dimmed, and Ryan walked to the center of the room like it was a stage built just for him. Good morning, he began, smooth and confident. This is the Apex national campaign strategy I've been developing. I leaned back in my chair. There it was again. I, not we, not the team. I, for the next 40 minutes, he rolled through every slide I had created. The visual journey map I had drawn by hand. The segmentation table I had rebuilt 7 times. The tagline I had rewritten at 1:13 a.m. on a Wednesday night. But something was different today. He was nervous. I watched it in the way his hand gripped the clicker too tightly. In the way he paused just a beat too long between sections. In the slight cracks in his voice that didn't exist before. Lauren noticed too. She kept stepping in, clarifying, which was her way of correcting him without admitting she was doing it. When the rehearsal ended, the executive overseeing the project spoke up. "It's strong," he said, "but it feels a little rehearsed. I want authenticity. I want ownership." Ownership. Ryan swallowed hard. For a moment, I thought he might glance at me, instinctively looking toward the person who actually knew the material, but he caught himself. His eyes stayed forward. Lauren jumped in. "We'll tighten it before the real session." The executive nodded and left. The moment he was gone, Lauren's expression dropped like a mask hitting the floor. "Ryan," she snapped, "that was sloppy." "I was fine," he said defensively. "You were not fine, you were unfocused." "I just need the data refreshed." "No," she cut him off, "you need to get it together." I watched them argue, the cracks widening. Their alliance was only strong when unchallenged. Pressure was revealing everything. When the room finally cleared, Lauren walked toward me. "Madison," she said sharply, "I need the updated figures for slide 8 by end of day." I didn't look up. "The figures are already correct." "Well, Ryan wants a refreshed version." "Then he can refresh it," I said. Her jaw tightened. "This is not the time to be difficult." I saved my blank document, closed it, and stood. "I'm not being difficult, I'm being accurate." She stared at me for a long moment, trying to read something in my expression. But I kept my face calm. People underestimate calm. Calm looks like surrender until the day it doesn't. I walked past her without waiting for permission to leave. At my desk, I opened the internal instant messaging system and typed a single message to myself in the notes feature. "They're crumbling." That afternoon, I made only one major move, one small, quiet extraction that mattered more than anything else I had collected. I scanned the schedule. I checked the building directory. I walked to the top floor, the one with the frosted glass doors and quieter carpets, the legal department. Their assistant looked up. "Can I help you?" "Yes," I said, steady. "I'd like to schedule 5 minutes with Daniel Pierce." Daniel was the company's internal counsel. Sharp, ethical, and, most importantly, a man who did not tolerate risk. "Is this urgent?" the assistant asked. "Yes," I said, "and very private." She studied me for a second, then checked the calendar. "He's free at 3:30. Perfect. I walked in at exactly 3:30. Daniel looked up from a stack of contracts, his glasses low on his nose. "Madison, right?" he asked. "What can I do for you?" I sat across from him. "I need to report a concern, and I need to make sure it's documented." His posture shifted, subtle but attentive. "Go on." I didn't give him everything. Not yet, not the full storm. I gave him enough. "There are issues of authorship on a major client project," I said. "Repeated issues, years of them." His expression sharpened. And I added, "There may be attempts to influence HR before the presentation." Daniel closed the file on his desk. "Do you have documentation?" "Yes." "Send it to me." "I will," I said, "but only at the right time." He narrowed his eyes. "You need to understand something. If what you're saying is accurate, the exposure is serious." "I know. And if you sit on it too long, you could be seen as complicit." "I won't sit on it," I said. "But this has to land where it cannot be buried." Daniel nodded slowly. "When you're ready, send it directly to me. And Madison?" "Yes. Be careful, the people you're talking about don't give up power quietly." I thanked him and left, my pulse steady. Because now it wasn't just me preparing for what was coming. Legal knew. Quietly, carefully, but they knew. That night I finalized the last pieces of the report, cross-referenced everything, polished the timeline, numbered the exhibits. When I was done, it wasn't a folder anymore. It was a weapon. And in 2 days, when the real presentation and the board meeting collided, I was going to use it. but not before watching them walk straight into it, still believing they were untouchable. The morning of the Apex presentation arrived like the air itself was holding its breath. I walked into the building carrying nothing but my laptop and a quiet certainty. Ryan was already there, pacing near the conference room, practicing lines under his breath. Lauren hovered beside him, offering last-minute coaching that sounded more like orders. I took a seat in the back again. From here, I could see everything without being seen. At 10 o'clock sharp, the Apex representatives arrived, 2 executives, crisp suits, sharp eyes, no patience for nonsense. The room straightened. Lauren stepped forward with a rehearsed smile. "Thank you for being here. Ryan Blake will be leading today's presentation." Ryan launched into it, voice smooth but too eager. He clicked through the slides, repeating the script he had memorized. But this time, the cracks weren't subtle. When one of the Apex executives asked a technical question about the data model, Ryan blinked twice and glanced at Lauren. "Well, that part was, developed collaboratively," he stammered. "Who led it?" the executive pressed. There was a beat of silence, then Lauren stepped in. "Our team produced this together." Ryan synthesized the findings. The executive didn't look satisfied, but he nodded politely. As the presentation dragged on, I watched sweat gather near Ryan's collar. His words tangled. He skipped a slide. He repeated a point. He misquoted a stat I had written. When he reached the closing summary, his voice trembled just enough for the client team to exchange a glance. "Thank you," he finished. The Apex executives stood. One offered a hand. "The structure is strong. The delivery needs refinement. We'll discuss internally." They left. The moment the door shut, Lauren rounded on Ryan. "What was that?" she snapped. "I was fine," he said, voice cracking. "No, you weren't. You gave them doubt. It's not my fault the data is too dense. Maybe Madison," she cut him off sharply. "Do not blame her right now." Interesting, the alliance was splintering. I stood. Lauren noticed. "Where are you going?" she asked. "To prepare for the board meeting," I said, her brows knit. "Board meeting, you're not needed there." "I know," I said, "but I have something they'll want to see." She opened her mouth, but before she could respond, Daniel Pierce, legal counsel, stepped into the room. "Madison," he said calmly, "it's time." Ryan and Lauren both froze. "Time for what?" Ryan demanded. Daniel looked at him with a neutrality that felt like a blade. "The board requested an internal review briefing. Madison will be presenting material relevant to the Apex process." Presenting, not submitting, not handing off. Presenting. Lauren paled. Ryan stiffened, trying to smile and failing. "This must be a misunderstanding." "No," Daniel said. "It isn't." I followed him out, their silence echoing behind us. Upstairs, the boardroom door swung open to reveal the company's top leaders. Sober faces, sharp eyes, no tolerance for chaos. I plugged in my laptop. "Whenever you're ready," the board chair said. I clicked open the evidence folder. The room went silent. What followed was not dramatic in volume, but devastating in clarity. I walked them through the timeline. The drafts, the version histories, the copied work, the past complaints, the repeated pattern of credit theft, the managerial cover-ups. Slide by slide, their expressions tightened. When I finished, the board chair folded her hands. "Thank you, Madison. Remain here. Please send in Lauren and Ryan." They entered together. 10 minutes later, only one voice echoed through the hallway, Lauren's sharp, panicked whisper. "You said this wouldn't come back on us." Another minute later, the door opened. The board chair stepped out. "Madison," she said, "please return inside." I sat. She looked at me with a different expression now, one that held respect. "We will credit you as the rightful architect of the Apex campaign," she said. "Effective immediately." My chest tightened. "Thank you. As for leadership," she paused, "there will be changes. Changes, the kind that collapse systems." The fallout came faster than I expected. By noon, Ryan's desk was cleared, monitor off, drawers open, chair pushed back like he'd left in a hurry. A security escort walked him out. He didn't look at anyone. Lauren lasted until 3. HR and legal met with her behind a closed door for 42 minutes. When she exited, her face was stiff, her blazer still perfect, but her eyes empty. She walked past the department without speaking. Someone whispered as she passed, Is she leaving? By 4, the company email confirmed it. Effective immediately, Lauren Mitchell is no longer with the company. The office buzzed like someone had broken a window. Shock, rumors, disbelief, but under all of it, truth. I sat at my desk, quiet, not triumphant, not gloating, just aware of the shift in the air. People who had barely noticed me before looked at me differently now, curious, cautious, respectful. At 5, I received an email from the board chair. Subject: next steps inside, a single line. Please meet with me tomorrow to discuss a leadership role. Leadership. Once that word would have thrilled me. Now it felt heavier. I walked out of the building and into the cool Chicago evening. Cars passed. People rushed home. Life moved with no awareness of the earthquake that had split open a single office floor. I reached the train platform and sat on a bench, feeling the metal chill through my coat. I didn't think about Ryan, or Lauren, or the presentation. I thought about the nights staring at a flickering laptop screen with my name buried in file history. The mornings walking into rooms where my ideas walked in before me, but with someone else's voice. The quiet humiliation, the quiet work, and eventually the quiet revenge. For years, I thought being invisible was the safest way to survive in a place built to overlook people like me. But invisibility was never safety, it was fuel. I watched a train rush past, its lights streaking the air. Tomorrow I would go into that meeting. I would listen. I would choose my future, not from fear, not from pressure, but from clarity. Because this story didn't end with their punishment. It ended with my choice. I stood, pulled my coat tighter, and walked toward the exit. Whatever came next would have my name on it. And this time, no one would be able to steal it.